Welcome to the Viking Age Podcast. It's the official podcast of the VikingAge.com. My name is Schad. I write for Zone Coverage and Fansided.com. We do this right here on the Viking Age YouTube channel. We're also in podcast form on Apple and Spotify, but however you consume us, make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe so you never miss a new episode and we can spread the word to the masses. Today's guest, you see him on the screen. He's been covering the NFL for over 2 decades. He's written for the Sporting News, Pro Football Weekly, Yahoo Sports, and he's now a lead draft writer at NFL.com. His name is Eric Edholm, and Eric, we'll go right into the fire here. I don't mean to put you on trial right away.
It's all right.
But we got to talk about these power rankings, man. My regular co-host, Adam Patrick, actually wrote an article about them at the Viking Age saying it should fuel serious rage. And just want you to know, I'm not mad. I just want to talk, man. I just want to talk.
I'm actually surprised we're talking right now. I mean, believe it or not, I did not think I would get an invitation after that. It's funny because I did a Bears podcast recently, and they had a slightly different reaction to ranking the Vikings 28th. They were a little more excited than you guys seem to be. Let me try to put it in the right framework, and maybe a little harsh. I can probably admit that. I was looking this morning just at Super Bowl odds, and there are only 10 teams with longer odds to make the Super Bowl the Vikings. So, we're not a massive stretch away. I also kind of worry a little bit just about Kyler Murray being the savior, if you will. And I'm a Kyler file. I like him in theory. I think there's some construction that needs to be done around him, I think, and we're going to see what the offense actually looks like and everything. But tough division, likely a tough schedule this year. Still some questions. Obviously, the defense redoing the D-line, counting on some of those early returns on the draft picks and things like that. Just the stability of the organization seems a little shaky right now, going through a GM search. I don't know how much that affects next year's win-loss record. And look, on the positive side, I think Kevin O'Connell is a really good coach, and I think Brian Flores is a really good coach. And I think, obviously, you look at some of their top-tier players, and you've got some good ones. But how it's all going to come together, we'll see. I suspect it's going to probably look a little foolish in time. I mean, they're clearly – they have a lot more going for them than a lot of teams in that range. But at the same time – it kind of comes down to how many games can you win in a tough division. I mean, some team in this division is going to be ranked fairly close to 28 by the end of the year. I don't know if it's going to be the Vikings. I don't know if it's the Packers. It could be the Bears. Could be the Lions. I mean, we're not, 100% sure they're going to be back to full strength again. But given, it's rare that you see all 4 teams in one division. And last year, I guess they kind of proved it. But all thrive. And so I just kind of wonder if there might be some close losses and things like that. How was that for a description?
Hey, I think you sold yourself pretty well. And you know what? Talking about the NFC North, I think this time last year, the NFC North got flipped upside down from a year ago. It's like the Bears were in last place. They were dysfunctional. Everything was wrong with them. And the Vikings were a Super Bowl contender. You could say the same thing about the Lions. You flip the standings around. Now the Bears are like the team that's saying, "Hey, we're ranked too low. What are you? What do we do? Top 10? I can't remember where exactly yet. Chicago
11, I think, or something. Yeah.
So I mean, there's the Packers, there's the Bears, and then like the Lions are in last place, and they're kind of reeling. This is what you wrote about the Vikings, and once I get past this, I'll ask you the other question that I have.
Okay.
But, you said after the surprise of the Caleb Banks pick wore off, the Vikings settled into a little groove with a few of their selections.
Yep.
Most of the same questions about Minnesota that existed last week still remains, although trading Jonathan Grenard both adds a worry and clears up cap space. I wouldn't be shocked to see the Vikings make a veteran addition or 2 in the coming months. They can use a center, a safety, and another receiver. And like you said, they're all very good points. Like, I agree with that completely. I also wonder, I think the shock comes in when you see teams like the Browns, the Giants, and the Titans ahead of them. Why do you think the Vikings are a step below those teams going into the season?
And that's kind of where I think some of the criticism is pretty fair, because you at the end of the day, you're kind of comparing the teams to the ones listed directly above them and directly behind them, right? And saying, well, why are we only slightly better than this team and not as good as this one? And The Browns had a great draft last year. I think they had another great draft. They obviously had a ton of capital. The quarterback question exists, and I understand this is a Vikings question. I don't want to spend too much on the Browns, but I really think their roster, like outside of quarterback, is in pretty darn good shape. I mean, I don't know how many wins that's going to be. That's the hard part with sort of stamping a grade or a ranking on a team in late April or early May, is that, I haven't seen the schedule yet. I don't know who's going to get hurt. I don't know who is it, and I don't know, how these teams are all going to kind of come together. And so things can change quickly. I think I had Seattle 21st to start the year last year. And I remember thinking, I'm a little harsh on them. They should have been probably more 16, 15, whatever. So it is entirely possible. And I've had a couple every year now that I've been doing this where it's like, boy, I hope the internet secretly deletes those so that people can't go back and use it as evidence against me. But, the Giants are obviously intriguing because of the John Harbaugh factor and because they have some interesting pieces there that, Malik Neighbors and Jackson Dart and that defense and everything. And so there might be just a little bit more post-buzz draft on those. I mean, post-draft buzz is what I was trying to say, to where I wanted to give them a boost, and ultimately somebody has to drop, and poor Vikings. I feel bad. I didn't mean to come down that hard on them.
I think there are a couple, we're both writers. Like, there are some assignments where it's just like it's a losing battle, right? Like,
yeah, right, exactly.
Is one
I'll never win in this one.
Unless your team is number one, somebody's going to be mad. And then, there's like draft grades and I don't know, like predictions or whatever. Like, there's just some assignments where it's like, I'm just going to do my best and make my point. And like, who knows? I mean, it could just all be the same tier. And like, even look at Seattle last year. It's like, midway through the season, I didn't think they were going to win the Super Bowl. We're like, right. Oh yeah, Sam Darnold's going to choke because he did it last year. And then all of a sudden he's raising a Lombardi trophy. It's like, football's weird, man. You never know at this time of the year.
This league is about like readjusting your expectations every 12 minutes. I mean, it really is. Every season is its own entity. I mean, in the NBA, we kind of know who the contenders are every single year. In Major League Baseball, we kind of know. I would say there are obviously a handful of teams every year that you feel pretty darn good about in the NFL, right? Because of the quarterback, the head coach, recent success, whatever may be, the strength of the roster. But how many surprises are there, and how many kind of carpets do we get pulled from underneath our feet every year? And, some of that's our fault, our own bias, our own way of looking at things. But obviously it is reflective of an NFL that every single year, I would say there's probably 20 teams that at least have an outside chance to make a playoff run and make some kind of noise in the postseason.
So the draft is your specialty. Let's dive into that right now. And I think any discussion about the draft has to start with Caleb Banks, 18th overall pick.
Yeah.
A lot of people were surprised the Vikings went this route with a high upside guy that has limited production and experience. Just start here. Do you think the Vikings reached for Caleb Banks at 18?
Yeah. What's so funny is that, like, talking to people around the league, you heard a lot of Banks Vikings connections. And so it was, obviously Dylan Tiernan was probably the name that was most mocked there at number 18. And I think for good reason. He's a darn good safety. But Banks was a name you heard a lot of. And so I kind of wondered, what's the most likely route to get him? Is it moving up from round 2? Because I didn't think he'd be there when they'd pick in round 2. Is it dropping back from 18? That felt like the most likely if I had to guess at the time, but I wasn't sure, So, when I saw Banks at the Senior Bowl, I straight out asked him, I said, what do you have to do to get into the first round? Like, how do you, because everyone knows he's a first round type of talent. I don't think anyone would argue differently. It's the health questions that really compound this whole thing. And I give him credit for trying to come back at the end of the year. He clearly wasn't, but twice he tried to come back, essentially got hurt early in the year, came back a couple weeks later, only played a little bit, and then had to miss most of the season. So I think when that report came out, that he'd have to have the foot redone, that's when I kind of I think maybe the first round is out at this point. So was it a reach? I think if you asked other teams, they would have said yes. It doesn't mean that a healthy Caleb Banks wouldn't have been a reasonable pick somewhere in the top 20. I think it was entirely possible. So if they medical evaluate him and feel like this is not going to be a chronic issue, this is not going to be the kind of thing that we're talking about 3 years from now and saying, are they going to pick up his fifth year tender? Then it could be a phenomenal pick. Obviously, the need is there. The opportunity is there. He was probably the one D lineman in this draft that you could say, like, makes a difference. Like, I don't want to make it seem like D tackles don't have a role. Of course they do. But, like, there are some guys who just do their job, hold the point, and make a couple tackles here and there. But there are other guys like Banks who can disrupt, that I think can change the way you have to block them. And so that's a big part of it. And I think his upside's exciting. It just, it's hard to know what you're getting year one and long term.
And of course, when you're 6'6" and 325 or whatever it is,
possibly big man, like, you stand next to him and you're like, dude, this is a huge human being.
And of course, with that frame and a foot problem, you kind of go red flag. But this draft was so weird. Where it was just, I mean, even like, we'll talk about Tiernan a little bit later and kind of their decision to go with Jakobe Thomas in the 3rd round instead. But it just felt like, the mock draft community, I think it was like 68% or something like crazy like that, had Dylan Tiernan to the Vikings, according to like the consensus mock.
Yep.
And I just think with a guy like Banks, like you could find a good safety in the later rounds. That was kind of my argument against Tiernan, even though he is a good player. I will agree with that.
Yep.
But a defensive tackle, if you hit a home run there, you are at such an advantage, and find a player that can make a difference. And that's what I think the Vikings need. They need difference makers. And even too, I think our friend Matthew Collar at the Purple Insider podcast mentioned this. Yep. It's not it's not binary. It's not either he's a superstar Chris Jones type or he's just a bust.
Right.
If he is in the middle, is that draft pick a win, or does he have to be an elite player to cash in on what the Vikings invested in him?
Yeah, you mentioned Chris Jones. Like, that really is what he could be. I mean, that's the kind of guy, multi-technique player who can be a problem at end. He can kick inside. He can play over the nose. He can play the 3 technique, and that's part of what makes Caleb Banks dangerous. But you're right. I mean, if he's a player who flashes dominance, but is only available 12 games a year, or, ends every single season on IR or something like that, that's obviously when the concern picks up. I mean, again, talent-wise, I don't really have a whole lot of questions about whether he can play or not. It's whether he's got the ability to stay on the field, and also does the foot sap him of some of his explosiveness and some of his power. Like you said, anytime a big man has, foot, knee, ankle injuries like that, you 300 pounders, those guys aren't built to last, just because of those concerns of stability and long term and everything. But yeah, I mean, you're right. He could be if he was the prospect that he was. Well, let's put it this way. I mean, if he's somewhere in the middle of that, just look at the rest of the defensive tackle class in this draft. There really weren't too many, especially the upfield kind of full-sized guys, not the 285-pound, 295-pound quick tackles, the ones who are like little gap shooters and stuff. But I'm talking about somebody who belongs in the trenches and can hold up power-wise, but also has that ability to disengage blocks, to make plays with quickness, to make plays from behind, that sort of thing. To open up things for other people. Like, there are only a couple of guys that fit that description. Caleb's one of them.
Looking at some of the other picks, you listed these in your rankings too, and I didn't want to get into them to kind of be redundant in the show, but 2nd round, the Vikings go with linebacker Jake Golday out of did I pronounce
Cincinnati? Golday, yep.
Golday, yep. Jake Golday out of Cincinnati, versatile linebacker. The streets are saying he's an Andrew Van Ginkel type. Do you think he can replace Andrew Van Ginkel long term, and how does his versatility translate to the NFL?
Yeah, he was a fun player to study, and I thought he had maybe at one point I was thinking, boy, maybe he's a 1st round pick. You never know, right? In this draft, especially. But yeah, I mean, a kind of a self-made guy, and really, made himself into the player he is right now. Very good athletically, but I think obviously the hard work that he's put in to become more instinctive, and he's obviously got the pass rush background, but still kind of new to linebacker. So that I think that there's some crossover between what he and Van Ginkel do. Now I don't know that he's going to be quite as hellacious a player as he was at his best. We saw, he could be the most disruptive player on the field at his very best. I think Golday is a little bit more steady of a player, fewer flash plays, but fewer low points as well too. Is he a Mike? Is he a Will? Is he kind of he's sort of a hybrid linebacker a little bit. And so I'll be fascinated to see what kind of role they kind of carve out for him. And he's a mature kid. I think he'll be ready for action right away. But they may add to it as time goes on.
Selfishly, Andrew Van Ginkel interception is one of my favorite prop bets each Sunday because it's so low and it could happen. So if you hit once or twice with a $5 bet, you're covered for the whole season. So
man,
if Golday can keep that tradition alive,
yes.
I think I'll be happy.
Yep.
Northwestern offensive tackle Caleb Tiernan joined the Vikings in the 3rd round. Guy in your backyard and just outside of Chicago there. This is an interesting one because Tiernan played a lot of left tackle at Northwestern. The Vikings obviously had Christian Darrisaw struggle with some knee problems. So what do you see here? Is he a swing tackle that can move over to the right side and maybe eventually replace Brian O'Neill? Or do you think the Vikings are trying to tell us something with Christian Darrisaw's knee?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I haven't talked to anybody in Minnesota about the Tiernan pick specifically, so it's hard for me I can speculate and say that one of the things that came up on him was the short arms. He is a big, tall guy, but only 30. He's unusual body shape. You don't see a 6'7" guy with 32-inch arms very often. That's a little bit unusual. Michael Ruse, remember the old Titans tackle, was that same way. I just remember him being an outlier in that regard. Maybe the Baker, Sam Baker, the Falcons kid as well. I don't think he was quite as tall, but still, unusual build. And some people, I thought maybe he was best inside. And the fact that he was drafted towards the back end of the top 100, what was he, 98th overall or 7th or something like that?
Yeah.
I thought this was a guy who had a chance to go in the 2nd round. And just because of the shallow tackle market. So the fact that he lasted about another round after that tells me that more teams projected him inside. I don't know if the Vikings are one of them. But that swing tackle idea you came up with makes sense, right? Obviously, if you need him in a pinch to play left tackle, it's his most familiar position. If you need him to play right tackle, he can. He's probably smart enough and capable enough of kicking inside, especially if you start kind of cross-training him a little bit as well. So I think there is some versatility to his game. I would guess he's probably a 4-position player. I don't know that center is what you want to put a tall guy like that at, but there have been teams that have tried it. You never know. So I think it's kind of a cover your bases pick in the sense that, you may start with one plan. Okay, he's gonna back up on both tackle spots, but let's also see if he could try left guard. Let's also see if he can do this. And so, if you're truly looking for the best depth pieces, those are the guys you love to have because they can help you in multiple spots.
The guard position is very interesting to me when you bring that up too, because they have Donovan Jackson, last year's 1st round pick at left guard, but they spent a lot of money on Will Fries, and the Vikings have basically spent this offseason trying to erase Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah's big spending spree off the books and everything. So when you say guard, it makes me think Will Fries might be in a little bit of trouble here, but we'll see. I hadn't
thought of it, but it makes sense. Yeah, or at least protect. Let's see what he can do. Let's see what he's capable of, and then let's kind of make a decision on some of those players. Yeah.
So Miami safety Jakobe Thomas was another pick that you liked. He was a 3rd round pick acquired in the Jonathan Grenard trade. We mentioned it a little bit. Dylan Thieneman was wildly popular among the mock draft community with that 18th overall pick. How does Jakobe Thomas compare to Dylan Thieneman? And did the Vikings make the right decision by passing on Thieneman and going with Thomas in the 3rd round?
Yeah, they're different safeties in my opinion. I think Dylan Thieneman and Caleb Downs, for that matter, those guys both kind of fit the role of the kind of the modern either middle field or split field safety where, you're asking them to cover roughly half the field, and be able to kind of read your keys and cheat on plays and understand this is a run, this is a pass to this side of the field, or they're working in this progression this way. Here's where our coverage is most vulnerable, kind of making those diagnostic decisions on the fly and having that that kind of view of the field, if you will. Thomas, I think, is more of a read and react, run and chase kind of safety, where he's a pursuit guy, and he's going to be kind of full throttle in a lot of ways. And we've seen him be hyper aggressive at times and occasionally take the cheese and play action, things like that, misdirection. And I would say, just in terms of ball production and coverage ability, it's okay. But I would say he's got the potential to be very good, especially with Brian Flores, who can kind of weaponize that aggressiveness and make sure it's being used in the right way. And he went in that kind of same late day two, round three is what I was trying to say, range, where you started seeing a lot of safeties already off the board. And so to get him at that point, I think was pretty good value. I think that was, right about where I kind of figured, sort of late third, early fourth. But yeah, if he can kind of harness his aggressiveness without being over aggressive, without sort of trying to make too many things happen out there, he could be darn good. And he's got, obviously, good experience in championship game and this playoff run. He stood tall.
There was another project. The Vikings didn't have a 4th round pick, but they had 2 5th round picks. And we'll get to Domonique Orange here at the end, but just kind of sticking with your value theme. Charles Demmings of Stephen F. Austin. Love the Skol because it reminds me of one of my favorite pro wrestlers, Stone Cold Steve Austin. But outside of that, Demmings, workout warrior, 9.97 relative athletic score. That's on a scale of 10, if you don't know. What do you like about Charles Demmings?
Yeah, obviously we're kind of in an era where a lot of these guys will level up, and for that athletic profile to be at SFA, that's pretty impressive. And I would say he probably is best as like a man corner, if I had to guess. You see somebody with the ability to kind of flip his hips and run and move, and I don't know how good his instincts are. What I saw, it was hard to really kind of glean, but he's not the biggest, strongest corner out there, but he's competitive and he's a good tackler. And that's something that I think, obviously the ball skills are there. Be able to cover in man, which is what they like to do at times. That plus the special teams, I think will give him a chance to make the opening roster. 5th round picks are, they're not guaranteed a spot. I would say it's maybe a little better than 50-50 or somewhere around there. But I think his profile lends very nicely to being, a gunner or a jammer on special teams. Obviously a 4th or 5th corner to start. And yeah, I think they did pretty well in the 5th. Bredeson's going to be a good run blocker too, I think. Bringing the fullback back, which I appreciate. I like having those guys out there. We've seen it kind of come full circle, but yeah, I think they did pretty well.
You said Bredeson. That's the next guy I wanted to talk about because he is the ultimate football pick in the 5th round. Just get that, and I've seen his highlights. Get that dude a neck roll because I think that would just fit him perfectly. Where he's got like the blood coming down his nose from the tight helmet or whatever.
Oh yeah.
The thing people aren't talking about is he can line up at tight end as well and deliver it from there. Like, was a 5th round pick too much to invest in this guy? Or, what is it about Bredeson that the Vikings could like here?
The Vikings found CJ Ham a decade ago and kept him and found a role for him. And is that worth the 5th round pick? I think so. Again, I understand different eras and all that, but I think the run game is cycling back in. And if you assume that, he's also going to have a pretty busy special teams role in some respects too. And you could line him up on the wing, tight end, inline, backfield. Obviously he's probably not going to touch the ball a lot. That wasn't something he did at Michigan, but he earned a reputation for good reason. Obviously he's got a name people recognize with his brother, and but 2-time captain, respected by his teammates, puts all kinds of effort and work into his craft, clearly committed as a blocker, decided that this was going to be his path to making it in college football in the NFL. And Consistently clears nice lanes, and the effort is there. I think the angles are there. Everything kind of works. I would say, I don't know how much I've seen him in pass protection, but again, he's going to do everything he can to be good at what he does. And so, I think about some of these really valuable pieces that find their way onto NFL rosters initially, and you think, wow, they're long shots, and how did they get there? But they become those players that are so like, what will we do without them almost, and I think there's just a reliability factor that you like. And so if you have a fullback with a little bit of flexibility and great effort and execution, 180th pick or something like that. I mean, look, it's not that big a reach. To me, especially in this draft. I kept talking to teams who said, they had 120 guys on their board and they didn't think it was the 7th round depth was that good and this and that. And I mean, pick players you like. Don't just pick guys on a sheet because they're the next name on the list, right? That's not a good drafting philosophy. They clearly targeted him, said his skills will translate to our offense. If there's a time and a place that makes sense on day 3, we're going to pull the trigger. And they did.
Yeah. And I mean, too, it shouldn't be discounted what's happening. Kevin O'Connell's mentor, Sean McVay, used 3 tight end sets.
Sure,
the Vikings might not have 3 tight. I mean, they got Hawkinson and Oliver, but who's their tight end 3? It might be Bredeson, where they line him up at tight end and just say, all right, go for it, because he's definitely capable of that. So that's a big one. 2 other draft picks that you kind of interested me, and I just wanted to get your opinion on. Domonique Orange, big citrus. Yes. I've watched a little bit of Iowa State. I thought about our friend Jesse Pierce, who is no longer with us. Of course, she was an Iowa State alum, and she would have been jacked to see Big Citrus, or just an Iowa State player on the Vikings. What can you tell me about Big Citrus? Because he seems like he could be a fan favorite if he does a lot for the Vikings.
Oh, yeah. I mean, thick, sturdy, 2-gapping nose tackle who, I mean, look, honestly, his and I love the big guys. Believe me, I was a big Ted Washington fan back in the day. All those guys, Keith Traylor, all those guys who were as wide as they were tall. Like, I love those guys. But I don't know that there's a ton of sexy to his game other than his weight, like throwing the weight around a little bit. But he does have a little bit of quickness. He does have some strength that obviously he can handle some double teams and fight through blocks, and just to be able to get off the ball fast makes a big guy that much harder to block. He doesn't really get into the backfield, right? I mean, we're not talking about a guy who is, I think he had 1 sack in 50 games, minimal tackles for loss. But again, like Bredeson, there's a value there that you can't put a statistic on, and that clears up Jake Golday to make a play. That clears up other guys to have clean lanes to run through. That messes up the opponent's blocking scheme. You'll see Orange kind of get pushed off his spot a little bit sometimes, like his momentum carries him out of the play almost. But I think overall, as long as you have your expectations realistic about what he's going to offer in passing situations, he's going to fill a very valuable role for them. And they needed their position was bare. That's about where I thought he would go off. There was a time where top 50 was being discussed for him, even though I didn't personally think it was worth that. I understood why people, in a class that only had about 5 or 6 D tackles that I thought were, fit NFL parameters and could do a lot of different things. That's nice to have.
And of course, too, I got a little excited there when you were talking about the big guys, Pat Williams, Kevin Williams, Wall. Like, I think the 3-4 is relatively new for the Vikings when it comes to using it. But they've never had that big old nose tackle that just takes 2 guys and just kind of takes them out of a play. It's kind of what they wanted Shamar Stephen to be in a 4-3 defense under Mike Zimmer. But I think Domonique Orange could definitely be that. And he's not going to be a guy that you count on for, 600 snaps. He might be a 300, 400 snap player that you bring in, like, opponent's going to run. We're going to get Big Citrus in there and stop it. Speaking of the run, Demond Claiborne, Wake Forest. The streets are saying Diet Jahmyr Gibbs or Devon Achane. I think that's probably a little bit of a reach. I mean, it's like your draft day thing. Like nobody ever says, "Oh, he reminds me of Ryan Leaf," like the next Ryan, something like that. It's always Pro Bowl. This guy is fast. This guy is dynamic. I kind of argue if he turns out to be Aaron Jones, that would be fine because he's kind of getting up there in age. Is this all draft hype, or what do you see in the former Demon Deacon?
Yeah, no, when I was doing my my story for predicting the top 40 runners in the combine, I called Eric Galco at the East-West Shrine game because he's been really good about identifying fast players and getting some guys down there that he knows are going to test well and it's going to result in a pretty good draft slot. Claiborne was one of the first guys he mentioned, and I think what you notice with him is that he's this little like wiry ball of muscle, all kind of just packed in like tightly, and he's explosive. I mean, he's got that kind of home run ability. I don't know if it's always going to translate, but on that turf with the ability to kind of turn nothing into something, that's a creative running quality that not all good backs have, right? I mean, I think all great backs have it, but either with power, elusiveness, tackle breaking, whatever it may be. But with Claiborne, you see it pretty consistently where he looks hemmed in and then all of a sudden a little magic, boom, he's out in the open and makes a play. I think there's some times where it works against him too, where he tries to do too much as a runner and it ends up kind of hurting him. It doesn't always take the lanes that are given for him. His size is obviously a little bit of concern too. How much can you realistically do? But I think you're thinking about it the right way. I mean, if he is your third back now and is the one-day replacement for Jones to pair with a bigger back like Mason or whoever, then I think that makes a lot of sense. And kick return is obviously a possibility too with him. But the kind of guy who could just add a little life to your offense, like, the run game sluggish, throw him a screen, he can give you something, or you give him a draw on 3rd and 8, he might pick it up, and that's the kind of player I think he'll end up being in the NFL.
I think a lot of the talk has been this offseason with Kevin O'Connell's offense. He wants explosiveness back in the offense.
Right.
And rightfully, a lot of people are like, okay, better quarterback play, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, big throws downfield. I also think he wants to spring more of those big runs on the ground. And
Sure.
Everybody gets obsessed with the volume with Kevin O'Connell. I think if they're averaging about 5 or 6 yards a carry, and by the way, Frank Smith considered one of the best run game schemers in the NFL.
Yep.
If they're kind of in the bottom half of rushing attempts, but they're getting 5-6 yards a carry, I think they take that. And I think Claiborne's a big part of that.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, he's, I think what's going to help is that, he's a 5 yards per touch kind of guy. I mean, I think he will, whether, he may not put up massive receiving numbers. You may hit him on a big play here and there or whatever, but he'll get you 5 yards when he touches it. I think that's a valuable thing to have, to know that, that may include handing it to him 3 yards deep in the backfield, or throwing it to him 2 yards deep in the backfield too. So yeah, I think there's something to be said for making the most out of your carries.
So, I mean, there's Cincinnati center Gavin Gerhardt. I don't know if you have
Didn't
any
watch
thoughts
him.
on him. Didn't watch him.
I mean, I knew the name, I'd seen it, but I hadn't watched him. Yeah.
You know what? I mean, it's kind of funny you meant. So I thought it was Ben Bredeson when he got drafted.
Oh,
so
right.
I dialed up Dane Brugler's Beast Guide, and I said to Adam, I'm like, it's a bad sign in the 5th round when you dial up the Beast and you can't find that guy, because he has everybody in that thing. Like Ruben Hippolyte was in that thing, and he got taken in the 4th round, and you're like, who is that undrafted free agent in the 4th round? Okay, yeah, you go ahead, Bears. See how that works. But overall thoughts on the Vikings draft. What did you think about it? Did they do a good job? Did they take too many projects considering where they're at? Like, what was your overall consensus on this draft?
Yeah, no, overall, I think it was okay. It was a little bit blue collar in some respects. Obviously the Banks pick, like you said, is kind of what can take it from a C to an A or back down to a D plus, at its worst. Right. So I think Banks is obviously kind of the wild card, and I didn't know what to expect out of Rob Brzezinski, and I thought maybe it would be more of a Rick Spielman kind of a draft, and maybe it became that over time. But that first pick it just threw me off a little bit. And I respect the player. I get it. It's just it's a roll of the dice. Everything else there felt like there was a high floor. I mean, you kind of know what Golday is going to give you. I think you kind of have an idea what Domonique Orange is going to be. Maybe Jakobe Thomas has a little bit of a, could he be much better than expected or a bust? Yeah, of course. Right. But Bredeson, I mean, some of these other guys, it just felt like they just hit a lot of, stand-up doubles, opposite field singles, and then the one big swing with Banks. So overall, on the whole, pretty good. Does it massively change the team for this year? Only if Banks turns into a stud. I guess if Jake Golday becomes Carson Schwessinger part 2, I'll take that what I just said back. But like the guy who can impact it right away and prove that he belongs is Caleb Banks, and he could be very good. And if not, maybe they don't get a lot out of the rookie class, year one. They get maybe some blocking from Bredeson. Domonique Orange does his job. Tiernan is a backup, whatever. I'm just saying that Banks has that ability to kind of amplify this class to a different level.
And I mean, you talk about opposite field singles and doubles. I mean, that got Joe Mauer into the Hall of Fame, right?
Right.
I mean,
hey,
the Twins.
I love Joe's swing, man. Just every single time, same thing. What a player.
I think when he was playing, a lot of Twins fans were annoyed with his salary, but then you stumble upon, I mean, I don't know how much you're on X or whatever, but you've seen That Guy Rocked account where it's like old MLB players, like they have like Joe Mauer defensive highlights, and it's like, oh, dude, he was awesome. It's like
he controlled the game. I mean, he controlled your running game. He hit like second, third, or fourth. He was always gonna get on base. I mean, what don't you love about the guy? He played forever. I mean, what a great player.
And of course, too, if the Vikings have a draft like that, it'll be better than what they've been doing, where it's like Joey Gallo or Matt Wallner or somebody else who just swings as hard as possible. I'm not upset about the Twins or anything. I mean, sometimes it just kind of comes out like that.
Hey, I'm a Red Sox fan, so listen, times are hard, man. Believe me, I get it.
Oh man. Hey, so you got a lot of work going on at NFL. Are you basically, is this like, when a boxer has a fight and then, afterwards they're like on vacation, having a Mai Tai somewhere? What's going on at NFL.com with you right now?
Yeah. Schedule release is coming up. That's the next big thing. I've got a couple things in the works prior to that, I should say, and then full coverage on that. And before you know it, we'll be in mini camps and OTAs and everything like that. So, some long-term planning for the next couple months, little kids soccer. My kids are both playing this summer, and maybe some family time as well, but still trying our best to keep the football fire lit,
And where can people follow you online, Eric?
NFL.com. That's the place to go, baby.
Absolutely. Hey, Eric, thanks for your time. I mean, we'll forgive you for the
patience. Thanks for understanding. I'm not a jerk,
I mean, Adam sent me that. He's like, look at this. And I'm like, 28th. I see it. I mean, I've been saying this all the time. At one point last year, the Vikings were a 4-8 team. They do not deserve the benefit of the doubt to be like, Kyler Murray's here. They're a top 10 team now. Like,
it's hard because I like Brian Flores and I like Kevin O'Connell, and I was always the guy standing up for Kyler when other people were picking on him. So I felt like I'm betraying some of these people a little bit. But as I tell people all the time, well, what if May power rankings matter to you, right? I mean, is this just a slow time where you're like, like you said, the draft grades, everybody gets all upset. If they do well, they'll move up. That's what happens. So it'll fix itself.
And maybe you can follow the Vikings rise to the top over at thevikingage.com. We got all the rookie hype over there. We got people like Eric disrespecting the Vikings. You can read about that and
bring our haters out.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, you can check out my Vikings and Twins coverage. It's over at zonecoverage.com and Minnesota Wild coverage. Wild out of the first round for the first time since 2015. Yeah. I'm writing all about it at Hockey Wilderness. You can go check that out as well. This, of course, is the Viking Age Podcast. It's the official podcast of the VikingAge.com. We do it right here on the YouTube channel, and we're in podcast form on Apple and Spotify the very next day. But however you consume us, make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe so you never miss a new episode, and we can spread the word to the masses. For Eric Edholm, I am Schad. Skol.